Anyway, I just
Yeah.
don't think the whole spin argument's a good one. Because I
Yeah,
feel like
that
it can
ends
go
it. That ends the
both
argument, in
ways.
my opinion. It's ended it since 2015.
Yeah,
So
it's just I don't know.
the whole argument for the helicopter, to my understanding, is inertial reference frames, and that because the helicopter is powered, it stays with the wind and with the earth. I'm not sure
Automatically?
what he was getting on about with the boat and such,
Wait, are
but
you
like,
saying automatically? It just stays with it because it's powered, it automatically is just in sync with the Earth? Is that what you're saying?
Pretty much that's their explanation.
Well, it doesn't, it's not an explanation. That's what they say. It doesn't actually make any sense. Could you make sense
Yeah,
of it?
I know, but it's their
I know you know.
explanation.
I know
They're
you know.
happy
I know.
with it. They can get
I don't understand how they are. I'm really trying to understand how they're satisfied with that,
Because
especially when you have lives of people, like the danger of everyone on the plane. It would have to work exactly the way that planes do it, right? They treat the Earth as stationary, and the only way they could actually treat it as stationary is if it's stationary. That is kind of
Yeah.
simple, like one
I mean, look at
one
what
plus one
happened with the
equals two, right?
like the Hindenburg. You remember Led Zeppelin? You know what I mean? Like that's what happens with air when air technology goes wrong. All right, we need to get
There you
this
go.
shit correct.
Yep.
And
yeah.
yet again, you
So
are partially right on that, though, honey. Is that question is a big part of it because we've heard even yesterday them go back and forth, right? It's either in sync or it's not in sync, and it's been like double speak. And
Yeah,
we
completely.
need to
Always. It
have one
always
or
is.
the other said. That's a big deal.
Well, you know what it is? Again, it's the kinematics versus the dynamics with this argument as well. You can have a kinematic concept of this thing. You could even make the model work on a computer screen where it's going around, backwards certain amount with the Earth, but then relative to the Earth's surface, it's going forwards, right? Because it's just like they just subtract the amount that it would going that it's in sync with the Earth, and then it can fly wherever it wants. That's a kinematic mathematical concept that you can just make work, but you have to have the dynamics applied where the actual mechanism is totally specifically denoted and like figured out. Like it's this is not just like a guessing game of, oh, the air does it, and because it's powered it's automatically in sync, and we don't have to train the pilots to even know anything about that. Yet Coriolis is a real thing, so they would just have to like incrementally adjust for this. Even though they're not aware, they just do it. Even though the winds are not even a part of it, somehow the atmosphere is doing it without it being a wind. And even though they can fly the opposite direction of the Earth's spin, somehow they're going backwards without a mechanism to make the plane do that. It's just like a reference frame thinking kinematic concept that has no relation to reality.
that was a wonderful amount of word
Ooh,
salad. Do you have anything to prove that against
ooh,
science's
drops the
current
mic.
understanding of physics?
Oh, I love that I got called word salad finally for once in my life.
Hey man,
Champ
yeah,
used,
you get a
Champ
merit
used to
badge for
think that.
that.
You
You
used
get
to
a
always
merit
be
badge.
the best word
I was the
salad.
first word saladed person that I know of,
That's pretty
and
good, man.
but I was they threw the lettuce at me hard and
Word
cucumbers.
word salad is like just a bunch of words that have no relation to each other, and the
Bits of
person
French,
listening is like, yeah, just can't understand it.
French dressing,
So,
Russian dressing, Italian, just
yeah.
mixed. Yeah.
So you want to address any of the points that I made? How do you explain it? Whoever was in the word salad
None,
gallery.
none of it made sense to me. It was
Oh,
just
okay.
too much
Let me
waffle
let
for
me
me
put it
to
slower.
understand. I don't. I
I mean,
will respond.
you know what? I
I
was
will
speaking to
respond
some
though. I have
people.
my own point to make of that.
Okay, I'll put it in one sentence
You
for you.
can throw something off of a vehicle up in the air and it will come back to you. It's the
Yeah,
conservation of momentum is what it
conservation
is.
of momentum is a real thing. I've seen the videos that actually show, yeah, the trampoline on the back of the truck, and if he's going in one linear direction, he'll land back on the trampoline. Good thing the truck doesn't do any kind of turning, because then he wouldn't land on the truck, obviously. And good thing there aren't different tangential velocities that he's worried about landing on, because there's a gradient from the equator up to the poles to zero. So if he takes off from a conserved momentum area that doesn't match the equator's conserved momentum, then there would have to be an adjustment. He'd either have to make consciously, or there would have to be, some kind of mechanism to make the plane automatically in sync. But then that can't even be possible because there's fluid dynamics. So no baller even tries to claim that the atmosphere is perfectly in sync any longer, because that there is fluid dynamics. So even that amount of difference would make a would be dangerous to land. So basically, to make it very simple, the one sentence you need to hear is, there's no way that a pilot can treat the Earth as stationary while landing a plane if it's actually moving.
No, still disagree.
Well, then you have to explain how the compensation's done and what mechanism causes it, and why pilots are only trained to treat the Earth as level and stationary in all the flight simulators and all the instructions. They just assume it's stationary. So it
they
couldn't be
can
the same thing as moving. How can it be? Can you think of any dynamical differences that there might be between a spinning ball surface and a completely stationary surface as far as flying goes? Can you think of any differences there would be?
All they are doing is effectively overtaking the rotation to fly through the atmosphere at the speed they desire and then slow back down to land. It's no different than swimming through a pool and landing on the bottom. It's just traveling through a medium.
Right, but when you're traveling through the medium and there's different tangential velocities of the surface that you're flying over, and you're in a separate reference frame, it doesn't work, bro.
All of it is traveling at 15 degrees per hour.
But how?
What do you mean how?
Yeah, it has to be a mechanism by wind. Wind is pushing. So wind is pushing. Wind is pushing the plane to be in sync with the Earth. Are you saying the wind does it? What's the mechanism?
I'm not perfectly versed on it, and I will admit that.
What's that?
I do not believe you're right in the slightest in this.
I don't know. Would you say would you admit? I wanted to hear what you admitted. I couldn't understand what you said.
High altitude.
You're admitting
winds,
what?
are they all moving at 15 degrees? You know, all of these jet streams, are they moving at 15 degrees?
Yeah. How is it? How is the atmosphere doing anything to the plane? Yeah, it doesn't work out for it to be perfectly in sync so that the pilot could just assume it's stationary, because the Earth continues to rotate 15 degrees, 1,000 at the equator, and different speeds tapering up, just like a racetrack. So there would have to be all kinds of instructions on how to deal with that problem as well as wind. Winds are one problem. Rotating surface is a second problem.
What you would probably effectively do is treat the plane as the thing that is moving, and thus you can treat the Earth as stationary.
But that would be impossible.
But think of it this way: no matter how far, let's say the Earth is moving at high speed, right, and you're moving at a slower speed. Well, just take the delta difference between your two speeds. You can treat the Earth as stationary at that point.
So what are you saying? A mathematical equation is going to make them land safely? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying how you can treat the situation. You can treat it as stationary.
But you couldn't and be safe. So you would have to know exactly what's going on. You can't just decide to think about it a certain way or treat it a certain way if it's not actually that way when you're talking about landing on a surface.
No, let's do a thought experiment. Let's say that boat he was talking about earlier is going at 50 knots, right? And you're in the helicopter traveling at 30. Obviously, you're not going to land because you're not going to catch it. You can treat that as stationary in the water and treat your speed as negative 20 knots.
Okay.
That'd work fine.
How does that help your point?
But you're accounting for the speed, right? And again, you're still accounting for the speed of that boat, regardless.
Yeah, for the boat. But don't get lost on me. I'm saying if you were to treat it as rotating, I'm saying if you were to treat the Earth as rotating,
don't get lost in my eyes now.
Still talking. If you were to treat the Earth as rotating, you could still then treat it as stationary mathematically for how you are moving.
But that's dangerous.
No. Wait. Okay. Understandable, but you just said while you're doing that to try to land on a ship, you have to figure out in that moment and see how fast that ship is moving, and then start doing some accounting, right? And figuring out with your plane or whatnot, your helicopter, whatever you're flying. So if that's the case, wouldn't you have to do that with the Earth in that moment?
Well, as I said, if the boat was going at 50 and you're going at 20, you're at 30, you're effectively going at negative 20 relative it. So in that situation for the Earth, your math would work out that you would be going backwards if you were to treat it as stationary or not. It doesn't matter which way you look at it. Like, you're going to get confused between the Earth and the boat. But whatever the situation is, however the physics works out, you can just subtract or add the difference and treat either as stationary. If you want a plane going at 50, and let's say the Earth is technically stationary, you can just treat the plane as going at 50, or you can treat the land as going at minus 50. You know, in Futurama, they say that the ship moves the universe around it. The ship's not moving, the universe is moving. It's all relative.
Do you understand? Do you understand that? Wait, hold on. Do you understand this is not a mathematical thought experiment we're proposing? This is a life and death matter that we're trying to figure out how it actually works for a plane to treat the Earth as stationary if it's moving.
And when you only think about things in flesh space and rather than physics-based space, that's where you fail. Because what you're trying to do is move this to a personal, emotional argument about a pilot
Not
in
at
a real
all.
situation,
No,
not the physics of the
dynamics.
situation.
You have to explain it dynamically. The dynamics are the physics of the relationship between the bodies in motion, right? You cannot just say kinematically in this concept, we could just subtract it in our head and you can treat it however you want, minus 50, plus 50. It's all relative. So it doesn't really matter because it's all just a thought experiment and doesn't really have anything to do with really landing the plane on a surface that the pilot assumes is stationary. If it were actually moving, totally different situation, obviously, necessarily.
Me, it's I understand the thought experiment of you're treating the ship as it's stationary. However, you're not. Because when you have to then, again, in that moment, account for the speed of the ship, you're no longer accounting for it to be stationary. It's moving.
Yeah, but you can effectively consider it to be. Yeah, if you're that pilot, yeah, you're aware that it is moving, but once you know how quickly it's moving, if it's moving at 20 knots, you know you just need to be at least 20 knots for it to not go further away or closer. And
do you think
And
that
that's the
they,
same thing when I'm flying, right? If I'm flying and I'm changing my position, I'm closer to the equator. Am I going to have to account for that? Absolutely should, right?
No, I don't think so. I believe there is an element of the physics that I'm not familiar with and you're not familiar with that means that the plane can just fly how it wants, at the speed it wants, to approach the location how it wants, treat it as it's being stationary, and land perfectly.
Well, that's kind of insulting because
I
now you're
appreciate
saying,
that.
right, now you're saying you don't know, but you're also
Right.
assuming we don't know.
And
Why
guess
would you
what? I
assume we
don't
don't
know.
know
I'm
when we're telling
questioning.
you? No, I
I'm
do know.
questioning.
I do know. I know that there's no way a pilot can treat the Earth as stationary if it's moving.
But
And I would love to
if
see
you're
your
saying, wait,
research
if
into
you're
that,
saying
and
you
I
don't
would
know
love to.
physics, and I'm just supposed to basically, everybody who's listening or anyone who's trying to logically think about this, there's a physics that we just don't know about. How come we don't know about it?
Because not all of us are educated to that level. Do you know about React.js? No,
Yeah,
but it
but
still
why do you
exists.
automatically go to defend it, right? If you logically are sitting here going through this thought experiment and break it down in reality, it doesn't make sense because you should have to do the same thing
Exactly.
like you do for the ship and everything else. But we're just going to go ahead and go, well, physics, has got it figured out, but we just don't
It's
understand.
not a matter of us not
At the end of
knowing
the day,
something. The
Is it's
pilots
kind of
aren't
like
made it. Yeah, the pilots are
it's
just
kind
told
of
to
like
treat it as stationary, bro. The pilots are told that it's level and stationary in all the flight simulators. So if that's the case, then did you understand the problem, right? You see that
yeah.
there has to be a better
no,
answer.
no,
It's
that's
kind
the
of like
point.
the dude is saying that
he
he's
just
got
decided
like a silent.
what's
Hang on,
funny.
just one
What's
second.
funny?
Like, give me a chance, man. Like,
Hold on, I
he's
was
trying
trying
to
to get it
say
before
that
you did.
what he's talking
Hold
about
on.
is
We
a
continue.
silent.
Your mic's
Hang
a
on,
little low, Carlos. Sir.
a silent appeal. He's
I
got
think
like
his
a
headphones are
silent
a little low
appeal
too.
to authority, right? And he's using people that he doesn't know, and there's equations that he doesn't know. It's an appeal to authority, and it's a cognitive like reaction. It's a paradigm breaking thing to use your logic and think, well, actually, if it was stationary, that'd be the most logical answer.
Well, he can look it up very easily. I mean, the pilots are only taught, every baller has to admit that that's been in this argument longer than he has a little bit. They know that the pilots just assume it's stationary and level. That's how the flight simulators are. That no one tries to argue that it's moving and they account. Well, when they're forced to, they start, saying, well, they just has to correct this little incremental bit over a period of time. And then, but the pilot would be trained to do that if that was something he would be needing to do, but he's not. But then the ground path, just follow the ground path, and that gets your somehow momentum added up to the right amount so that you can land, in an opposite direction, but still keep that momentum. That doesn't make any sense. You can accelerate past the original conserved momentum, but you can't add momentum. That was from being on the Earth. So there's no way to add
So,
momentum, meaning that if he accelerates and there's a difference, he has to accelerate too, even if he was aware of doing that. There's no way that he would be able to continue accelerating sideways eastward as he's landing on a north facing ramp going south. He's going in opposite perpendicular direction. You can't make the plane go with the earth in sync sideways. as you're trying to slow down the land. So it's common sense, bro. It's nothing to do with some argument from authority that none of us are aware of. It's just a total contradiction that debunks your globe. And it's hard for you to think that's possible. That's why you're assuming we just have no idea, but you're wrong.
So one of the things you're assuming there is that they should have to assume it's moving because reasons of things.
No, because they say it's moving. That's why, because they say it's moving.
I was still talking.
Well, no, you're a straw manning me. So I was going to say, it's not at all.
The reason I would give for they treat it as stationary is because the physics around it, both things moving, aren't important because they're infinitesimal. And that is something I don't think you looked into, honestly.
Doesn't that sound like hand wave to you? I mean, infinitesimal, even a little bit, even a little bit of
infinitesimal because infinitesimal.
Yeah.
So is it that way with the boat too? They don't have to really worry about what speed it's going.
Exactly.
No, that's not what I said.
No, I know it's not, honey. I'm actually asking you. I'm not saying you said that. Okay, I promise.
My more suggestion would be
estimations
I don't think any human here who has ever been on a large ship that feels like it's not moving, or a plane when it's not experiencing turbulence, nobody here treats the thing as moving. You treat it as a stationary floor. You know the plane or the boat's moving, but you don't treat it that way. It's a simplification.
If I was jumping from another plane on top of the plane that's moving, I would treat it as moving.
Absolutely.
What if they're moving at the same speeds, right next to each other?
Well,
then you're counting about speed. You're already accounting for the speed. If you're accounting for the speed, you're accounting as something moving.
Yep.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is
you'd have to be so in sync. You couldn't be any estimations. You understand that? There couldn't be.
You can treat it as stationary.
Yeah, but you couldn't have negligible or kind of or almost or infinitesimal or any of these kind of estimation words involved in your explanation for this. Yeah, none of that could be involved. It has to be precise because the pilot always treats it as completely stationary. So it'd have to be in such perfect sync eastward, sideways possibly, or any angle that the runway happened to be at, plus going in and out of jet streams that go 200 miles per hour faster than the supposed rotation. So how is it in sync after it gets out of a 200 mile per hour faster rotation? Would be going 1,200 miles per hour at the equator. So none of that adds up. Yeah, all of that totally contradicts.
Where does the rubber meet the road here?
Yeah, the rubber would be meeting the road and breaking the wheels off if there was even a slight difference between the rotation eastward of the surface and the rotation eastward sideways or whatever angle of the plane, possibly having to go backwards without any mechanism or any kind of awareness on the pilot's part that that's what's going on or that's what he needs to do. The only way you could treat it as stationary is if it's actually stationary, unless you actually have an answer rather than just hand wave it.
I am not educated enough to know fully the mechanics of it to answer your question. I don't think you're educated enough to be able to reject
I'm not qualified now. Oh, you're not. Now you're not qualified, but you're qualified.
And I ask one more question, and again, please.
Let me correct.
You're not qualified to judge if I'm qualified or not.
Let me correct Stacks from that. I'm expressing my opinion. I never claimed that I was fully qualified in anything, Stacks, other than React.js, which is part of my job. But I'm sufficiently informed that I think I can have a conversation, and I'm willing to say when I believe that my level of education on the matter has reached its limit. I'm not the one going further without qualifications.
Hey,
you're making it seem like I attack you now.
Let's forget the argument. Hey, you know what? Let's forget the argument and just say, okay, another thought experiment. If there was a situation where the plane was out of sync eastward with this tangential velocity of the Earth, and he was trying to land, it could be dangerous. You could at least understand that would be a problem, right?
Not exactly, because if they turn and accelerate, they eliminate that conserved momentum and are now in their own inertial reference frame.
Okay, so they have to continue accelerating as they're slowing down to land, though. You understand that?
Well, yeah, because they were going too fast.
Right. So how do they have those kind of judgments? Do they have something in the cockpit that lets them know how fast they're going directly eastward with the spin of the Earth? No, they don't have that. So you're talking about estimations, like a really dangerous situation. It has to work exactly the way that they treat the Earth, which is stationary.
Again, you're just repeating the thing that I said, that I'm not educated enough to go further on. I believe.
Well, you can understand it could be a problem, right? You can understand what the argument is.
Your perspective, if you guys don't mind, please. I want to ask it.
Yeah,
I feel like more better. I'm not saying you're saying it incorrectly though.
Yeah,
but
I didn't do a very good job.
Can you at least understand, like even like how I'm asking you? Because I'm questioning it, right? So when you're thinking about it from a logical standpoint, you may not be educated enough to go any further to answer it, but at least we have some a little bit of validation of why we think this way. You know what I mean? Because it makes some logical sense, and but you just don't have the answers like maybe some people don't have. But it does make logical sense what we're talking about that you would have to account.
Are you afraid to steelman our argument because then you might agree with us if you can't find a good answer for it?
Not that I think you
No,
agree,
absolutely.
just questioning. You know what I mean?
What I can admit is the things you put forward are asking about things that I'm not familiar with and would love to learn about, but I don't invest that much time heavily into this matter in order to research
Yeah.
all these topics. I would
Well, you know
also
what?
like to see.
How about this?
I was
How about
still
this thought? Go
talking.
ahead. Go ahead.
Still
Sorry.
I would love to see someone bring that to me directly, like even a Glober to directly say, yeah, this is the thing that actually accounts for that, and I would love to learn that, or even on your side to look into it further. I'm welcome to be educated and happy to say when I don't know. I'm not going to turn to your thinking because, and I'll admit this as well, because I like to be honest. I am under the assumption that you have looked into it in a very light amount, made an assumption, and you consider that fact.
All right.
I'm
So
going
here's another thought
position.
experiment.
In my position, I assume that you're wrong, that you haven't looked into it enough, and I am confident that I don't know enough and would love to know more.
Okay, so let's just one more thought experiment and then I have to go. But speculation, just a little speculation on your part. Let's say you're wrong, like we actually have looked into it for several years and we know that there's no answer for this. And you go and try to find an answer on the baller side and it's not sufficient. It doesn't meet the common sense that you would require for it to actually be like, making sense for you that that planes land safely all the time. It has to work a certain way. Like if there's not a good answer and that's what happens, could you speculate on what that would mean to you? If you could not find it was impossible for planes to land on a spinning ball surface, if they're treating it as stationary, let's say you found out we were right, then what?
For me, that would be concerning, yes.
Perfect.
And I
That's
would want
all
to
I needed
break
to
that
hear.
down further.
Good night, guys. That's all. Yeah, it would be concerning. At least I got that out of you.
He's a good one. Yannick is pretty cool,
Yeah.
honey. His perspective. Have
Okay.
a good one, sweetheart.
Love you guys. Love you guys. Take care.
Sweet
Love you too, honey.
dreams.
Bye.